And can't say we are politically incorrect. So. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to State of Play, the politically incorrect online show coming to you from Joy FM and Joy News. And of course, that's exactly where you can join us on the Joy FM and Joy News Facebook pages. My name is Joy99.7FM. The new face, but it's the same old deal. Today on State of Play, we're looking at the issue that everybody is talking about, and it is the accounting for the Covid-19 expenditure, which is what's supposed to have happened in Parliament yesterday. The question we're asking is, sika no here? Some of the faces are old, but we've got a couple of surprises too. First of all, of course, Ray is here. Good to see you.
How are you doing?
Not bad. I'm enjoying
you sound too formal. Yes. You have to break it down. I know your abilities when you break it down.
I have to let people down very slowly.
But major concerns being raised.
Yes.
Let me see first. I think we should spare some time, small time though, on why the finance minister had failed on several occasions to go and do what he did yesterday.
There's a conspiracy theory about that, but let's hear what most people think, including yourself. What are your ideas? Why did the man just not turn up?
See, there is an attitude that we in this republic, especially the people we put in office, feel. They don't think that they are the servants. They think that they are their lords, they are the leaders, and the power gets to them so much that they determine when to do what they want to do. Elsewhere, this censure the parliament was talking about, and they had to take the speaker to say none of your business will be considered before you come to us. They forget that we elected, and the minister was not elected directly, not in parliament, not in India. Nobody voted for him anyway. In fact, there was no indication that he would be on the ballot. So that's aside the point. More importantly, we elected a president, direct election, universal adult suffrage. We went to the polls. We elected a president. We gave him power. And we asked him to appoint people on our behalf. He did. You are one of the people we appointed. Then, our people vetted you, our representative vetted you. You submitted yourself to their vetting, and they approved you. They could have rejected you. No, but they allowed you to go through that process because we believe that we also elected them to check you. When they invite you to go and account for what we believe should be done, it is your duty, regardless of what you are doing, whether you are going to sign some 25 million loan, less the amount of money you are dishing out to people for cathedral and other things, it is immaterial. The most important part is that you respect us. You, your masters, even though in Ghana it's not like that. We, your masters, you respect us and go and account for it. So to me, it suggested there was something to hide.
Look, let's be honest. Let's tell the truth. Nobody elected Ken Ofori-Atta. Ken Ofori-Atta has no constituency. There are no people whose livelihoods depend on Ken Ofori-Atta's success. There's nobody for whom Ken Ofori-Atta will feel the need to behave himself just to stay on their good side. There's no such thing. Okay, the only person that he's supposed to answer to is the president. We've already seen evidence that he has no concern or fear of being disciplined, brought into line, or anything by the president. He is the only member of this government who has spoken openly against government policy.
The free exercise for
Thank you. Nothing happened to him. And I'm sure he was actually being quite tame if he had allowed himself to be as open and honest about how he feels about so many things that are happening in government that he deliberately does not fund, even after the budget approves for them to happen. If he had been honest enough with us, we would have been shocked to discover the number of things that as finance minister he simply does not support. And sometimes people have to go behind his back, according to our sources, go behind his back and speak to the president in order to get money released for the things that have already been approved and agreed. Because we may think we're in this country running according to the agenda of the president. But I wonder who's really in charge.
So look, it will be some of those things that will make him feel like I determine when I go to Parliament.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, it's the disrespect for the people who actually put the government in place. And if you really believe in true democracy, some of these things will not be happening. It's okay when you say that I'm not well, there are other contingencies, so I cannot do so. The Parliament is complaining that most of the time these indications come in the morning of the event.
Now, on the last time that he didn't turn up, it wasn't because he was out of the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
It wasn't because he was in any way indisposed with something that was more weighty than answering to Parliament. He attended the receipt of some 20-something million,
4.9 million.
An event which was attended by the Agric Minister, who is the more relevant sector minister for what was happening that day. Why he had to be there, I don't know. The loan has already been approved. The person to use it is the Agric Minister.
Yeah.
But he felt that that was a more important place for him to be than Parliament. Because he's not worried about any of you people. None of you elected him. And the person who appointed him now, when
you have a worker who is not working and also has an attitude of disrespect, it's more painful. If your worker is delivering and not necessarily respecting, you don't care. But because it's the end result that you want.
Let's not assume that the president feels disrespected by Ken Ofori-Atta.
But we, the ordinary people, are the ones who actually
yes, he doesn't care about you. Listen, I think we have at least one surprise today. Our colleague and friend and brother Daniel Daze joins us from all the way in London, where he's been doing some great work for the BBC, among others. Daniel, what a pleasure to see you. And what is that happening on your face? My goodness, you let it go.
One joy of not having to do TV every day, but I get to cover my face a bit. How are you guys doing?
Not bad at all. No, listen, I'm curious.
You left out his middle name. The middle name you gave him anyway.
Oh, Adazabantu Yaba.
Yes, please.
Since we have been politically incorrect.
Yeah, it has to be put on record.
Yeah, Daniel Adazabantu Yaba does it. Listen, Daniel, listen. I'm curious about something. Every time these stories come up in the media in Ghana, I start to ask myself, what do others think of us? What do outsiders think of us when we grapple over little things like this? Our own finance minister just won't turn up to account to the people. And when he does, he leaves chunks of it out, leaving Parliament in a state of confusion, causing them to call for a probe into what he has just come to account for. What do people think of us? The international media, and the general public in other parts of the world?
I'll tell you for free that one of the issues from Ghana that has captured international attention has been the Speaker of Parliament's response to Ken Ofori-Atta. That probe that has been huge. A lot of people are interested in it here for the key background reasons, but I'll get there in a second. I just wanted to make a quick comment on what you were talking about earlier with Raymond, which is the element of accountability that we have within our democracy itself. The problem with Ghana's elections from 1992 is that democracy has always been the election and not much else after, so that when decisions are being taken on behalf of the taxpayer often has little to no input, and there is often little to no accountability to the taxpayer directly. Why is this the case, Kojo? Because our political class is largely removed from the rest of us. We often find complaints that when, for instance, monies that are supposed to be allocated to members of parliament are being decided, sometimes they even ask the media to leave so that they can decide amongst themselves what they are going to pay themselves. And it has parliamentary correspondents have told you on numerous occasions. I'm sure Raymond, you've seen this happen. If you look elsewhere, if you look in South Africa, the president of the country, he regularly goes to parliament to go and account for what he is doing. If you look in the UK, where you have spent so much time, so there are regular prime minister's questions. The leader of the country goes to parliament to regularly account for what exactly is happening. He goes to submit himself for questions like how the finance minister has done so far. The man that the finance minister answers to is the president. There was a tradition started under the Kufuor era called the Meet the Press era, where the president himself would sit and the rest of the country would ask him questions. Journalists would genuinely ask him questions. There have been questions raised about the credibility of that process. People say that, oh, they planted people in the queues, but it happened. Yeah. I remember it happened a number of times. Our very own MFA Powell went to ask John Mahama whether or not he has ever visited why there are people languishing in prisons. Under President Akufo-Addo, we went for those a couple of times. Could you remember? You and I went for those a couple of times. Yeah. It's been a while since that President Akufo-Addo has appeared even before journalists, much less Parliament, which we don't have any mechanism for, or any form of public forum to answer questions. We saw the Vice President a couple of times. The President himself started off by doing it a couple of times. I must say, even for the last time that sort of engagement with the public happened, it was very short. I remember I was sitting in the crowd when Mr. President mentioned that at X time I'm going to have to leave. Yes. He's a busy man, but we comforted ourselves with the fact that it may happen again. It has not. So that's sort of the backdrop under which we have formed what in Ghana we call a democracy. We can't ask questions. We can't hold people accountable. This is not the first time that the finance minister has done this. Remember the president's flights, which was also another story that captured international attention. Yeah. When several attempts were made to ask the finance minister to come and answer questions. Again, it was after a number of different questions by Samuel Kujeta Blakwa, that the finance minister answered these questions. So it looks like there is a certain pattern forming.
And this feeds into a certain conspiracy theory that he does this when he doesn't have an answer. But what he's doing is he's working in the background with his allies in Parliament to ensure that whatever he comes to put out, they will be ready to immediately jump to its defense and block off any probes to dig further. And the example of the example that Daniel just gave is what feeds that conspiracy. Okay, because that time when he eventually turned up in Parliament, you remember what he said? It's not my department.
So if you knew it was not your department, you could have taken two different occasions for you to come to the determination that it is not a department.
You could have simply written to Parliament to say, oh, I'm sorry, you've asked an urgent question and you've asked it to the wrong person. Please direct it to the rapper. Oh, no. He waited. He made them wait. Then he turned up and said, I'm not the guy. So it sounds as if it's all part of a chess game, doesn't it? That eventually they know they have nothing for you, but they are going to waste your time as much as possible. By the time they come along, and basically in this case, what he came to present to them is almost exactly what he presented in the budget. Apart from a couple of discrepancies. So shall we talk about the discrepancies?
Certainly. Now, to be fair, after all of these delays and the things that have happened, the microphone. You have to go on. Yes. You see, when you identify with the people, jacket matters will not happen to you anyway. Now, there are some of the issues. There are some of the issues that are very key. The expectation is that you either give us final figures, authoritative figures that will not be questioned by anybody in this country. In fact, people can mysteriously question it. But to any right-thinking person, it makes sense. If it makes sense, we can move on. And we will not require any further probe. Because really, when I heard that the man was bringing a dossier, I actually felt, wow, that's great. Maybe that was the reason why he had delayed for God knows how long. One of the things that jumps at anybody is, to date, how much was raised and how much was spent within the periods of 2020 and 2021. It is so fundamental that before we started spending, I recall deeply that the World Bank was so clear that we will give you money, but keep the receipts. Because there will be a day of reckoning and a day of accountability. No excuses will be accepted. This is the beginning of all of this, because they knew that, especially governments like to hide behind things, emergencies, and be doing all the expenditures and come and create impression. This is what they have done. So why is it important? Up till now, we have heard the president and other people give figures that some people pointed out as contradictory. For example, one of them, the president has said in March, that 70.7 billion cedis was the amount we spent. I like to quote exactly his words. He says, in the State of the Nation's address. In all, data from the Ministry of Finance tells us that an amount of 17.7 billion, and we did the GDP part of it too, or 4.6% of GDP, has been spent in containing the pandemic since 2020.
And the word spent is important there.
Brilliant. Now, our finance minister, and forget about the other things she has said about it, sought to clarify and insist that there were no inconsistencies in what the president has said and what he's saying today, and that it is very clear. In paragraph 19, the finance minister says, Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, I wish to dispel the notion that there has been inconsistencies in government data on COVID-19. His Excellency the President intimated during that State of the Nation address on 30th of March 2022 that we had mobilized about 17.7 billion since 2020 to fight the pandemic. In all fairness, what is really the 17.7 billion? Mobilized or spent? Let's put that one aside. Now, the minister then moves on to do a further indication of how much has been actually raised between that period. So, minister now gives us an indication, and we know from his delivery yesterday that he says, no, take your time. We have actually mobilized some 18 billion, not 17.7 billion. I want to believe that this is an updated record. Forget about the spent versus mobilized. But he says 18 billion and not 17. But how much has been spent? The president told us we have spent 17.7 billion. He raised concerns when he said, okay, what are details? But the minister tells us, no, we spent just around 12 billion. Between the 17.7 billion and the 12 billion, whose final figures are we to take serious and recognized?
Okay, so now another thing is going to start happening. And by the way, this is State of Play. Make sure that you use the hashtag State of Play when you're tweeting at us or when you're commenting under our live feed on the Joy 99.7 FM Facebook page or the Joy News Facebook page. All right, we'll share some of your thoughts in just a moment. But listen, you intimated that, Daniel, you intimated that in the UK there is quite a bit of interest in the fact that the Speaker of Parliament launched a probe following the visit of the Finance Minister. That in itself is quite a big deal. I mean, let's think about it. How are political commentators on the side of the NPP, how are they going to explain this? That, the Finance Minister came to Parliament to account for COVID-19 money. By the time he finished, Parliament launched an investigation into the COVID-19 expenditure. Just that sequence of events is dodgy. How exactly, how do they justify this in their communication?
It's a very interesting one, and Kojo, I'm so glad that you asked the question in the way that you did, because you see, at the heart of it, there is the governance that we see, and then there's a perception of it. Again, the backdrop of what I'm going to say is whether or not Ghanaians feel represented, and whether or not Ghanaians feel they have a stake in their government. When this parliament started with those dramatic events of early 2021, of January 2021, because you and I on several occasions said on several platforms that this parliament will definitely be one to watch. This parliament is one that we must trust to be able to hold the executive to account. On some occasions, that has not happened to the satisfaction of the Ghanaian. We saw the case where Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa had to resign from the appointments committee. We saw the approval of the budget happen under some, controversial circumstances. We saw fights. We saw all of these things.
We saw how our constitution getting approved under interesting conditions as well.
And getting the highest number of votes,
indeed.
Under interesting circumstances as well. And with all of these, and I remember before that, I had done interviews, I had spoken to minority MPs in confidence who had told me that there is no way Hawa Kumsin will be approved. But that's not today's conversation. She's a minister, she's work. The heart of the matter is that Parliament, it's about time Parliament will seem to be acted. Okay, it's about time Parliament will seem to be an independent body, because Kojo, I don't think that we'll get a parliament like this again. If you look the way our politics is arranged, a parliament with an opposition speaker sitting at a knife edge, with people with some people's eligibility to even sit in the house being raised to question. And whenever these things happen in Ghana, there's always a cycle where the politicians double down and then they decide to plug those holes. So I don't know if we'll get this parliament again. I'm waiting to see what will come up out of this probe, because again, this will be a probe called by the speaker, but will be majority, but will have a majority of on the side of the party in power. Most likely is the finance and health committees. The chairman of the finance committee, Kuku Kwati, has already said on AM show that there's no question, there's no problem at all. In the previous parliament, we saw when it was cash proceeds, we saw a couple of, but even in this parliament, we saw when the health minister came to answer questions. The answer that came, the result that came up out of all that sort of left a bit of a sour taste in the mouth of Ghanaians who were looking for a certain form of accountability. So yes, the speaker has spoken. Yes, it's a bit of a, if MPP communicators wanted to manage this, I would have said that. Because again, all of us have studied communications in one way or the other. What you do is you see that full transparency, and then you begin to dial back and go into the naughty issues, because we all know that COVID was not an easy time. We all understand that this was a very sensitive moment. It wasn't just Ghana, it was a global issue. If you add what is happening with Ukraine, inflation is real. I'll read an article that shows that every political idea of running a government, socialist on the left, capitalist on the right, and those who stand in the center, they are seeing rising inflation. Some nations are seeing it more than the other. For instance, we see that Senegal, the inflation is about 7%, which is still their highest in about 14 years. Ghana's inflation is also at over a 20-year high, heading towards 19%. I stand to be corrected there. But at the heart of it, times are hard. People can understand. Talk to us. Let us know what is going on under the hood. If there are mistakes that have been made, let us see that you are acted. That's the only way that any communicator can speak to a discerning Ghanaian and help him understand that there was indeed nothing shady going on, in my view.
All right. You get what I do get you. Listen, this is state of play. Here we are politically incorrect. So I have two decidedly politically incorrect questions. Let me start with this one. I think this is the more tame of the two. So, as we understand it, when COVID hit us, we were all in a tizzy. We didn't know what to do. We were a bit concerned. We were flustered. We had to mobilize. We had to mobilize, right? So all of this money started pouring in from those who were willing to help us. Okay, 100 million there, 300 million there, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. We took all this money and we used it to manage our COVID situation. Yesterday, according to the finance minister, we even made a profit.
Yeah.
So, does it not beg the question, did we really need to set up a national COVID-19 fund, pass a law to create a trust fund which collected money, and now when you go to their website to try and find out what they did with the money, they say the website is under maintenance. Hey, they've been maintaining the website for months now.
I mean, that also came in when people realized that during COVID, we gave money to the National Union of Ghana students, yes, to do handing over ceremony with the greatest of respect. If COVID is the period where even universities are not doing graduation ceremonies, what business does a mere handing over ceremony require any ceremony to actually proceed with? But anyway, how is that even relevant COVID expenditure? But that's aside the point. I actually feel that because people were just, and there are some theories about these times when there are emergencies, governments all over the world have been known to abuse it for their own benefit. So they exploit it. They go into fictitious expenditure, procurement, and they'll give it the same claim that, there's this theory in procurement that when there's a major emergency, sometimes we dial down on the rules and you actually have to fix the problem first. Lies more important than the money immediately. We abuse it. So we tend to find all other loopholes to exploit and take money from people. It's one of the reasons why we said, people have to contribute. I mean, very well-meaning people, bring your money on board and all of that. Some of us insisted that just take it to the consolidated fund and let's use it like we are accounting for any other thing. But they said, no, a trust fund will work out perfectly. And that's what they said of some of these things. But to have spent, and you see, this is what they declared to us. that they found it worthy of declaring that they are giving money, 40,000 or so, to the National Union of Ghana students, not to give to poor students who are struggling to actually get some education or get anything done, or who are home, who would have been in school and are struggling to just do online education, or help with beefing up the internet supply, or small tablets, but to do handover ceremony. Tells you the kind of thing that we use the money for. So if you ask me whether it was relevant, the fruits suggest that it was another wonderful avenue to do the things that we do with money in this country at the time.
Meanwhile, let's bear in mind that the donations that went into that National COVID Trust Fund came from state institutions as well.
From
the Bank of Ghana and other institutions.
Finally, just give the money to government.
Institutions that required, extra support because we were in COVID time.
That's true.
We're donating hundreds of thousands.
Sometimes even sub-institutions of ministries were donating when their ministries are not being funded properly. As if the trust fund was going to do better than the government in the use of the money.
Anyway. And now their website is under maintenance.
Let's hope that
all right.
That's no problem.
Daniel, you were saying
it's interesting. It's interesting. This COVID-19 trust fund thing and how monies were raised. I'm sorry to bring this up again. It looks like in Ghana, it's only governments that has money. So when you have any opportunity given to private sector, government has to come back in. Number one is that there's a National Cathedral. Again, government was not supposed to contribute money. Government ended up contributing money. Now we have this COVID-19 trust fund. Government is supposed to raise money from elsewhere. Government is not supposed to. Let me throw a spanner in the works. When in the second or third year of free SHS, the finance minister in his budget said that, if you're someone and you want to contribute to free SHS, you can bring money. How much money has been brought in by who, and how has that money been used? Another one, the Ghana Cares of Atampa program. It was one of the questions that the finance minister answered. And he said that 30 billion has been provided as seed fund in the Ghana Cares of Atampa program. Gave a brilliant breakdown. That's 70 billion that is supposed to come from the private sector. Who has contributed? From where is that money supposed to go to? If government is not getting money themselves, there are innovative ways that, because look, we saw what finance ministers like Yao Mafo did when they were cash strapped. When they were cash strapped, we saw what finance ministers like Kojo Barudu did when they were cash strapped. There were ways, there were institutions that they would sit down with and hold money, take money, use money, and bring that back. And I'm sure Raymond, you back me up on this.
Absolutely,
on backroom discussions that happen, but there are always ways to collaborate with the private sector.
Listen, Danny, I hate to do this to you. I'm so sorry, but our time is rolling off, and we'll soon have to read a few of your messages.
I just want to do this thing in 30 seconds.
Sure, go for it.
Everywhere in the world, and I'll refer you to the debate over Elon Musk paying more taxes.
Yeah.
Whenever people are asked to pay money, the question is simple. If you will use the money for what we want you to use it for, or what you say you use it for, you can have all the money you want. Accountability encourages contributions. And if we keep on seeing things like finance minister not wanting to go to parliament and going to parliament with figures, that's going to satisfy Ghanaians. We can't encourage contributions for cathedrals, to a senior high school, or for COVID-19 allegation.
Absolutely, a very solid point there. Okay, now just before we read those messages, this is my second politically incorrect question. It's okay if we don't get a chance to answer it. But here it is. Are we going to pretend that we haven't heard a voice note going around from some party executive in the northern region claiming that they got some COVID money and distributed it among party executives? Are we going to pretend that that thing is not going around and we haven't been able to verify or determine its veracity, and whether indeed the northern region was an exception when it came to these distributions? Are we going to pretend?
Well, interesting. I mean, some of the messages I'm following up on. This one says, well, it's mostly what we spend our money on. We are not very honest people. Some of them not necessarily on the wave that you were actually watching, the live stream that we had, there are also some Twitter comments that will be coming in. There is no doubt about whether or not the delay from the finance minister suggests that he was hiding something, but nothing is hidden forever under the sun. This is Bright Akpe, who is saying that maybe I can trace other messages that are directly connected to you. There are people who are saying that they are still not satisfied with what the minister gave out, and that there's a need for further clarity on these matters too. But so this one says, we are charged 1,300 after allowing our neighbors to come and fetch water from our house. When the free water was announced, I'm at a family meeting denying pregnancy. I will comment later, but for now, he's telling. So this is Harry Rashford. yes. He's so worried about the situation. He's actually with the finance minister, Kenoforiata, did not tell us all the things we need to hear. This is from SPRM. Pastor Mensa is the one giving that information there. So more messages maybe from other people. The worst part is, instead of fighting against injustice, people are fighting for justice. Hashtag still a play. That's from Collins Little Tete, also joining the conversation in here. This one says, we really believe that the right thing can be done, but in this country, every day we lose hope, little by little. Anyway, that's also coming from. This is right. Put out that message there. So those are some of the messages that I'm seeing here. Yes.
You guys need to invite me more often. This was fun. Let's do it again. But keep the conversation going on social media. Use the hashtag State of Play. Daniel, what a pleasure. Let's find more excuses.
When they come from my head, I know who I'm going to cry on.
They won't travel that far. All right. Okay.
You are beautiful.
God bless you.